It was nearing midnight when the attack finally came. It was sudden, so sudden that the sentries standing watch had barely enough time to give the alarm before the first of the demons were upon them. They came out through Baen Draw in a massive rush, waves of black, corded bodies surging down out of the darkened northern hills into the light of the watchfires. One by one the fires winked out, smothered by the demons as they swept through the draw, and on to the slopes of the Kinsroad. With the watchfires gone and the night sky screened by the clouds that had swept east out of the break line, the whole of Baen Draw was plunged into blackness. It was a blackness that the demons knew well, to which they had grown accustomed during the time of their imprisonment within the forbidding, a darkness that would be made to serve them. For, while the elves and the Southlanders could now see little, the demons saw it as if it were brightest day. Shrieking in frenzied anticipation, they attacked the head of the draw, rallying about Ander Lessedal and the gleaming white staff of the Elkrais. The elven phalanx met the rush. The impact threw the soldiers backward, yet they held. Hundreds of dark bodies crushed up against them, teeth and claws ripping. The elves fought back determinedly, lances and pikes thrusting blindly into the massive demons that pushed forward, and screams of pain tore through the night. But the demons kept coming, surging into the elves, struggling to break apart their defense. For a few desperate minutes the elves withstood the savage rush, holding back the masses that hurtled against them. But the darkness confused and hindered them. In the end, they were overwhelmed. The phalanx began to give, falling back raggedly, splitting apart. Seconds later, the demons broke through. They would have been finished if not for Alanon, gaining the lower slopes of the Kinsroad, where the elven archers fought a losing battle in the darkness to keep the onrush demons. The druid seized a handful of glittering dust from a small pouch tied at his waist and tossed the dust high into the air. Instantly, the dust spread across the night sky above the struggling elves, filling the darkness with a brilliant white glow that lit the land beneath with the brightness of moonlight. Gone was the blackness and the demons' concealment. From behind the broken phalanx, a rallying cry went up into the main breach, where the largest mass of demon thrust forward. Rode Steed Jans and the men of the Legion Free Corps. Like an iron wedge, they split the forefront of the assault. Less than 400 now. They hammered into the horde before them and bore it back toward the mouth of Baen Draw. To their aid galloped the elven cavalry, Kael Pendannon leading, head bare, white hair flying. All along the shattered defensive line, the lances of the horsemen tore into the advancing demons and drove them back. On the slopes of the Kinsroad, the demons had broken through the ranks of archers and were pouring down into the Sarandanon. Alanon stood virtually alone in their path, blue fire lancing from his hands. They came at him from everywhere, howling in frenzy, as the fire burned them to ash. The druid did not give way. When they grew too many for him, he turned the whole of the grassland about him for hundreds of feet in either direction into an inferno of death, a wall of blue fire that ringed the maddened demons and destroyed any that tried to breach it. 100 yards back from the mouth of Baen Draw, the elves and the Free Corps fought desperately to keep the main body of demons from breaking through into the Sarandanon. It was a terrible, frightening battle, and the smell of death filled the summer night. At its height, Kael Pendannon went down, his horse stumbling beneath him. The old warrior was shaken and came to his feet unsteadily, fumbling for his broadsword. Instantly the demons were upon him, howling. Elven hunters fought to reach their beleaguered commander, slashing and cutting their way through the demons that rose before them. But the demons were too quick. Clawed hands reached for Pendannon, warding off the blows struck at them, and the old soldier was pulled to his death. At the same time, a handful of demons broke from the crush of fighters about them and hurtled towards Ander Lessedal. Through the ring of home guard that battled about him, the demons came, bounding like cats, to lunge for the elven prince. In desperation, he brought up the Elkrai staff like a shield, and his attackers shrank from it, howling with rage. But Ander was all alone now, surrounded by twisted black forms, and they snapped and tore at him, waiting for a chance to break through the guard of his talisman. Elven hunters fought desperately to reach the prince, yet the demons blocked their way, tearing apart those who came too close, parrying wildly the cut and slash of lance and sword. Their brethren surged to their aid, seeing that they had within their grasp the bearer of the hated talisman. Clawed hands reached out, grasping. Then through the tangle of fighters hurtled a giant scar-faced borderman, grey-cloaked, body streaked with dirt and blood. Up against the demons he went, cutting through the corded black bodies with great sweeps of his broadsword, until at last he stood next to Ander. Shrieks of rage rose from the demons, and they threw themselves at him. But Stygians held his ground like some immovable rock, keeping Ander's attackers from him as he called to his bordermen. They came instantly, riding to his aid, gathering about him in a circle of iron. Then he was back atop his roan, sword lifted. The grey riders charged forward, their battle cry ringing out through the night. For an instant, Ander did not realize what was happening. Then through the hazy glow of the false moonlight, he caught sight of the men of the Free Corps, Stygians at their head, red hair flying, one hand gripping the great broadsword, the other the Free Corps standard of battle. Alone, a handful against hundreds, the Free Corps was attacking. At once the Elven Prince seized the reins of the riderless horse, mounted, then spurred the animal ahead, crying out to his countrymen as the elves rallied to him from every quarter. He rode into the ranks of the demons, forward to the side of the Legion Free Corps. In a wave, the elves and bordermen swept down into Baen Draw, driving the demons before them. Like men gone berserk, they battered their way ahead, horsemen and foot soldiers with lance and pike and sword, shouting as one of the battle cries of their homelands. For an instant, the demons stood their ground, shrieking with rage and hate, tearing at the madman who so recklessly thrust himself into their midst. But the big man with the broadsword and the Free Corps battle standard had given fresh courage to the elves, courage that bore them forward to face death without fear, to forget everything but their determination to destroy utterly those twisted black forms that stood before them. The demons wavered and fell back, slowly at first, then in headlong flight, for the fury generated within the army of the elves was much greater now than their own. Into the hills north they fled once more, scrambling down from the slopes of the Kinsrow, through the rocks and crags of the Draw, flying into the concealing shadows of the night. In moments, Baen Draw had been cleared, and the Sarandanon was again in the hands of the elves. And Lesidel sat within his tent, stripped to the waist, as elven hunters worked on the wounds the demons had inflicted upon him during the battle. He sat in silence, his body aching with fatigue and the pain of his injuries. Messengers came and went, reporting on the progress of the army as it prepared to entrench once more across the mouth of Baen Draw. Home guard ringed the tent, the iron of their weapons glinting in the light of the watchfires. The Elven Prince had finished with the bandaging and was pulling on his armour when the tent flaps parted suddenly, and Stygians appeared out of the night, his giant form streaked with dirt and ash and blood. Those within the tent immediately fell silent. With a single word, Ander bade them all leave. The tent emptied, and Ander moved forward to stand before the borderman. Wordlessly he clasped the big man's hand in his own. "You saved us all tonight, Commander," he said quietly. "There is a debt owed to you that will be difficult to repay." Stygian studied him a moment, then shook his head slowly. "My lord, there is nothing owed to me. I am a soldier. Anything I did this night was no more than I should have done." Ander smiled wearily. "You will never convince me of that. Still, I respect and admire you for too much to argue the matter. I will simply thank you." He released the big man's hands and stepped back. "Cal Pendannon is dead, and I must find a new field commander. I want you." The borderman was quiet for a moment. "My lord, I'm not an elf, nor even of this country. I have no elf, nor countryman better suited to command this army than you, Yander replied at once, and it was your plan that enabled us to hold Baen Draw. Seajans did not drop his gaze. There are some who would question this decision. There are some who would question any decision, Yander shook his head. I'm not my father, nor my brother, nor the leader that they thought to have. But to be that, as it may, the decision is mine to make, and I have made it. I want you as commander. Do you accept? The border man thought for a long time before he spoke again. I do. Yander felt a bit of the weariness slip from him. Then let us begin. A sudden movement in the shadows by the entry brought them both about with a start. Alanon stood there, his iron face grim. The trackers sent north and south within the valley have returned, the druid spoke softly, the words almost a hiss as they left his mouth. Those who went south along the Innisbor found nothing, but those who went north encountered an army of demons so massive as to dwarf that which battles us within Baen Draw. It comes south along the eastern wall of the Kinsrow. Already it will have entered the Sarandanon. And the Lessedal stared silently at the big man, hope fading within his eyes. This was their plan from the beginning, Elven Prince, to engage you here at Baen Draw with the lesser force, while the greater skidded their Kinsrow north to come down into the Sarandanon from behind, thereby trapping the army of the elves between the two. Had you not sent those trackers? He trailed off meaningfully, and started to speak and stop, choking on the words. Suddenly there were tears in his eyes, tears of rage and frustration. All the men who have died here and at Haley's Cut, my brother, Pendannon, all dead that the Sarandanon might be held. Is there nothing we can do? The army that comes down out of the north contains demons whose power far exceed anything you have yet encountered. Alanon's head shook slowly. Too much power, I am afraid, for you to withstand. Too much. If you try to hold the Sarandanon longer, if you attempt to stand here at Baen Draw, or even to fall back to some other line of defense within the valley, you shall most certainly be destroyed. And his youthful face was bleak. Then the Sarandanon is lost. Alanon nodded slowly. The elven prince hesitated, glancing back momentarily toward the rear compartment of the tent where the king still lay unconscious. Unknowing, locked in dreamless sleep, far from the pain and the reality that confronted his anguished son. Loss, the breakline, the Sarandanon, his family, his army, everything. Within he felt himself breaking apart. Alanon's hand gripped his shoulder. Without turning, he nodded. We shall leave at once. Head bowed, he walked from the tent to give the order.